So lately, well, I wouldn't even really say lately, but for the past few years, I've been having a major problem when it comes to certain video games. I really just feel like there's a huge gap in the market for a very particular type of game. And I would love, maybe one day I can be a part of this process, but for right now, all I can do is hope. But I would love for a developer to sort of hear what I have to say and really consider what it is that they're going to do with their games from here on out. Because I'll put it like this: if you want to play a TCG, a trading card game, if you want to play a top-down isometric RPG, maybe even a tab target MMO, okay, we can move it up. How about some good old FPS action? You can get quite a bit of those styles of games in many different facets. Oh yeah, don't let me forget the age-old strategy game. Hell, maybe even some turn-based. You can find these games in abundance practically anywhere you look. If you scroll down on the front page of Steam or any other platform, you're likely to come across a variant of these games. In all honesty, if those games do it for you, then you have got to be in video game heaven, especially considering things like Epic Games handing out many different types of games for free. Listen, if these are up your alley, you've got to be in heaven. But me personally, I've got a bit of a different history that led me up to the point that I'm at now. But what I crave and what I love is a pure action, okay? What I like to call action melee. But just to go back a bit, so I named a few genres. Those are the ones that I consider easily accessible or found. Developers love to make these games. Then I could bring up third-person games just as a whole. Third-person games definitely exist. But if anybody's really taken the time to just look at the third-person games we have on offer, not many developers know exactly what to do with that medium. Some do. You got Rockstar, GTA games, for instance, and even Red Dead Redemption. These games are very realized third-person games, okay? And even with the ability for you to switch and transition into first person, I don't mind that. But as a whole, those games are built for third person, and they are incredible. I would say, in the case of GTA, and maybe even the same with Red Dead, that they're so incredible that they leave so much free money on the table. They could be far better games than what they are if they maybe weren't so focused on story and more so focused on the gameplay. What I want is something that you don't see often, because you will see quite a few third-person games, even if, in my opinion, the quality of those games varies tremendously. You're gonna typically see a lot of third-person shooters. Now, don't get me wrong, I love me a good third-person shooter. We got things like Metal Gear Solid 5, and even if some people want to shun it, I love Metal Gear. Metal Gear Survive. That's my jam. I would replay it and actually give it an updated try with my newish adult brain, but the online is pretty dead, so that game was integral to having online, so we won't touch that right now. But like I said, what I crave is third-person action melee. I'm more so focused on the combat. I love having a sword in my hands and I mean, you don't have to have a huge list of combos, but when I swing the sword, if there's a variation to the way that I can make my character behave with it, the better. You know, we got up slashes, jump in the air, maybe do some air combos, bring it back down with a ground slash, or no, a ground smash, whatever you want to call it. We got parries, dodging. I love dodging. Not many games can incorporate all these features in a cohesive manner, and in a way that keeps the gameplay front and center throughout the entire game. Maybe I will say there are games that keep it front and center. You got stuff like DMC. I would say the combat is front and center throughout that game, but maybe what I'm looking for is a little bit something more. Either way, main point that I'm making here is the very particular genre that I like often gets ignored, or when it finally does arrive, there's something wrong with it, or the general player base just doesn't understand it, so they sort of crap on it. I'm thinking things like Marvel's Avengers or even Gotham Knights. These are games that are actually way up my alley, but they definitely have massive flaws. But in all honesty, if you were to try and collect all the third-person action melee games we have, the quality ranges in severities. You've got like the older Spider-Man titles. I don't want to call that action melee, but this is about the greatest example I can give. Actually, before I go to Spider-Man, we've got things like Prince of Persia: Sands of Time. I don't even know if I want to call that action melee. I just remember he had melee and he had action, but it wasn't that in depth, but it had enough for me. I believe after Prince of Persia, I started to have a strong fondness for Assassin's Creed. Even that, I'm not willing to really call that action melee. Maybe when we step into Assassin's Creed Origins and Odyssey, that's when it gets action melee based. But before, it was more that counter system, heavy reversals and all that. You would essentially have a system where you could press one button, get the reversal, and the enemy essentially died, especially if you knew what you were doing. I mean, we got games like Arkham Knight, which in my opinion is an offshoot of Assassin's Creed games. Not that, I'm not going to say it's not that different. It is quite different, but the innate systems within itself are very similar. Counter, reversals, punish. But as far as what I really, really love, I would say it sort of started to come in the frame for me when I played Dragon's Dogma. Dragon's Dogma was one of the pinnacles of my gaming experience or gaming history. There was something unique about it that I could tell from the demo, and I saw that demo on PS3. The fact that you can climb, stab, you don't even need or even have a lock on. You direct your attacks with the left thumbstick. It makes total sense. Then we started to move into the Souls games territory, which I did enjoy at first. The only problem is that once Souls came out, it seemed like everybody got entirely taunted and distracted and thought just because the Souls system is a very robust system that works for them, maybe that's what works in general for third-person melee combat. And I couldn't disagree more. One of my biggest issues with Souls combat is the lock-on system. It's not like it's horrendous or even a bad addition. It's, again, it works for their game. But I think that when you have the lock-on system the way that we do in Souls games, it it really sort of confines the general feel of each engagement to a very sane emotion. That's why we always usually lock on and try and strafe to the back and get that backstab, because it makes sense and that system is sort of built around that mentality. But me personally, I like things to be free, fluid, and more importantly, I guess most importantly, action based. I love to jump when I want to jump, attack in the air when I want to attack, slash my sword on the way down when I want to. And there are honestly just not that many games that let me do that, especially in an open world fashion. One of the only games I can think of, I mean, I love Ghost of Tsushima. And I remember having such high hopes for that game. I even went out and bought a PS5 for it, only to get it and realize that that game is worse, in my opinion, than Assassin's Creed. Let's say Origins and Odyssey. I'm not gonna say it's worse than Valhalla. Valhalla is its own bag of but yeah, it's definitely worse than Odyssey and Origins, and in my opinion. Why? When you first load up Ghost of Tsushima, you might end up in two different pathways. One pathway is you're here for the story. You may be here for the story, the scenery, and you know, I would say even these people who would be here for the story and the scenery and the beauty of everything, they're probably there for the power fantasy as well, getting absolutely as strong as they can. Me personally, I was hoping to load up Ghost of Tsushima and have a very robust combat system that not only punished me for my mistakes, but allowed me to be creative and punish enemies for their mistakes. Now, I'm not going to say that that's not what they gave me, but I will say the way that they delivered what it was that they were selling wasn't the greatest for me. When I first loaded up, I tried to clear the map. Why would I clear the map? Because I love to be in a world that I love. And if you've got a ton of stuff for me to involve myself in, I'll do that. So I tried to. And I just remember going to the bath water. I remember taking baths. I remember cutting bamboo. I remember chasing foxes and petting them too. I just remember doing so much that wasn't involving the combat system. When I would finally engage with the combat system, they'd let me fight like 3 people, and I'd kill those 3 people rather easily. And then when they finally let me have more than 3 people, let's say around 7, they wanted to give me a story companion, as if I needed the help. I get it. On top of that, I'd go from long stretches in between combat engagements only to arrive at a lot of talking, fight 3 people, more talking. Then get on your horse and choose to go take a bath, cut some bamboo, or go straight to the story for more talking. Listen, that ain't it. That's not it. I would love to load into that world and just be in it. You know, Horizon Zero Dawn wasn't bad. I won't say it was really up my alley, but I will say that for the most part, the way that Horizon Zero Dawn was structured, when you loaded into the open world, you were involved in the open world, and your combat system was the main course of how you involved yourself. You would see all these creatures roaming around. It was sort of like a little bit of Monster Hunter. How all these monsters would just be out and about, and you had the tools to take them down. And you taking them down got you the tools you needed to make yourself stronger. Smart. Unfortunately, Horizon Zero Dawn, in my opinion, is still technically a third-person shooter. She has melee capabilities, but they are not the front runner here. she has a bow in her hands. So we are still shooting. Which I get it. We're still shooting. I understand. Not too bad. The worst part about Horizon Zero Dawn was the incessant need to pick up plants. If you didn't pick up enough plants, then you were stuck and you couldn't do much. There was a point where you just needed to continuously pick up every plant you saw. Then we got games like Monster Hunter, which I love, and it's actually got a lot of things that I would say are up my alley. You know, its combo system is a little bit, how can I say, it's not quite stiff, but it's doing something specific for the task, which is to kill monsters. You've got certain combos that you do, combo strings, I guess you can say, and you've got some special moves on top. They are effective and they get the job done, and they are fun to use. Does Monster Hunter scratch my personal itch for action melee? Yeah, a little bit. But it's not enough. I need more. I want more. I remember playing like Spider-Man on PS5. I would say that combat system it's pretty good. I'm not gonna judge it. The only issue is that you try and play Spider-Man and you maybe just want to focus on the combat, and they spawn crimes so slow. It might be a bit realistic, sure, but I need crimes all over the city. I'm trying to load up Spider-Man and swing from place to place in my own little stylistic fashion, see a crime and hop into it. I want about 50 crimes in an hour. Just because the nature of how they work, there's some small, some are a little drawn out, then you might get a car, whatever the case may be. I don't want them to think that they can give me too much crime. Because what would happen when you would play Spider-Man is you might load it up, especially, and you know what, I'm actually getting some things a little twisted. Miles Morales spawns crimes for you slowly, but Peter Parker, he has a limited amount of crimes per borough in the New York area. Every little subset of the city has about 5 crimes per specific chapter, something like that. Once you run through those crimes, I guess you saved the city. Something about that just feels wrong to me.
I should ask Genki about building some sort of underground ad blocker.
When you have limited crimes, but then you turn around and you tell me to go pick up a bunch of backpacks. You didn't tell me to, you gave me side objectives. Go pick up a bunch of backpacks, take some pictures, do Osborne's little challenge research things. You gotta do little research tower stuffs. You've got Taskmaster's challenges, which did involve combat here and there. Needless to say, I just wanted something. I wanted to punch people, and they sort of did their best to keep me away from it. So it just gives me a feeling of saying this isn't really for me, because I want to involve myself in the combat system, and I don't really want to have to go into the story mode to do it, because the story mode has a bunch of talking, only to let me get to a few engagements here and there, and then we get back to more talking. So that's not really it. I would love if Miles Morales kicked up the frequency of crimes, but I do appreciate the fact that they understood that people want to fight crime. That brings me back to games like Gotham Knights. Now with Gotham Knights, people didn't seem to understand the beauty of that game. Now I get it. The FPS was trash. Alongside the fact that it cost, I think, $70 on console and it was stuck at $30, yeah, I wouldn't be paying for that. But I bought it on PC. My PC handled it okay enough for me to still find the fun. Plus, I'm the type of person who can judge a game based off its performance and its gameplay. How can I do that? I came from the era of playing games and your FPS was trash, sort of no matter what. And I think a lot of us did. And back then, if we really judge games based off of performance holistically, we'd be putting a lot of our favorite games in the trash, especially at launch. But nowadays we can run it like it's nothing, so it's all good. Gotham Knights lets you spawn into a world full of crime. And they say, hey, it's your job to clean these streets. And what's even better is Gotham Knights set it up to where it was clean up the streets each night. Genius. It had story missions that you could go involve yourself in when you felt like pushing the narrative. But if you wanted to indulge yourself in combat, it gave you ample opportunity to do that. Another game, Marvel's Avengers. People wanted to crap on it. I understand the issues that it has. But listen, the lineage of third-person action melee games is small. There are not many games like Gotham Knights or Marvel's Avengers. What's the other game where we have a bunch of superheroes? Hell, you can take away superheroes, but just a bunch of characters in about a 4-player co-op scenario with action melee allows some characters to fly around, still with ranged attacks, so you can't quite call it only a third-person shooter. No, it had melee-based combat and it had ranged combat. It gave each character exactly what they needed to feel like who they were. There are not many games like that. You got stuff like Ghost of Tsushima's co-op mode, which was actually enjoyable because you loaded into that game and you did combat. That's what you were there for. Sadly, when I tried to play it, people weren't online that much. But anyway, back to Marvel's Avenger. That game had combat to where you would square up toe to toe with some of the big bads, and it was up to you to watch how they throw a punch, dodge to the left, dodge to the right, whatever it took, and return to sender. It's all up to you. And it did it in a 4-player fashion. That was actually one of Gotham Knights' biggest issues. To me, it was one of the bigger issues, was the fact that it didn't have 4-player co-op. It had 2-player co-op, which I guess you could say was main superhero and sidekick. But come on. Give us the 4-player. In the open world, not in a little DLC hive mode mission or whatever. No, I'm good.
Where is it?
I'll even bring up things like Force Unleashed. I love that game. And I wanted more games to be like Force Unleashed and less games to be like Dark Souls Fallen Order. Maybe my fashion or my taste in games didn't make all the big bucks, but if I'm correct, Force Unleashed was actually one of the bigger Star Wars games when it came down to making money. So I feel like, it was honestly their fault for ruining Force Unleashed 2 in the way that they did. But even that game still, even though it had a short story mode and what you did in that game was, rather minuscule, it was still a great action melee game.
Bring her to me.
It was a bit on the arcadey side, but hell, still, give me more. Give me Force Unleashed 3 over Fallen Order, or Fallen Jedi, whatever it's called. I honestly have a hard time thinking about coming up with competent action melee based games. There are not that many. I remember playing C9, Continent of the Ninth Seal. That game's got some action melee. It's a bit funky in these days, but it's still pretty great, especially for being an MMO. You got stuff like Black Desert, which has amazing combat. But what do you do with this amazing combat? You murder endless amounts of mobs. And then at a certain point you will do an open world boss. But it's just not that much. There's not that much going on in that game to warrant how cool that combat system is. Give me that combat system in a more fleshed out open world game. And it can be single player or co-op based. Honestly, I prefer single player games to always have an option to drop in a co-op character. So I'm down with that. But the way that they handled it in Black Desert doesn't really do it for me. The point is, there are just a lot of examples of third-person action melee, and not many of them are good examples. Honestly, Dragon's Dogma is the best I can come up with. Dragon's Dogma, Gotham Knights, and Marvel's Avengers. These are some of the best action melee games. You know what? And I'll even give a special shout out to Anarchy Reigns. That game, in all honesty, probably is what put me on the path that I'm on now. You know, I remember definitely Prince of Persia sparked my interest in third-person action games, but Anarchy Reigns gave me that feeling of wanting to complete a combo, knock somebody in the air, jump, or do whatever I needed to do to just end them. Another huge portion or problem with third-person action melee games is the fact that enemies, they have to be able to take a hit. And it's more than just having a big HP bar. We got games like Warframe, and I don't mind that, but the problem I would say in Warframe is, one, the content, what they have you doing with the content, which I honestly don't even know how to solve for, so I'm not gonna really even knock them. I just know that I don't want to do it. But when I'm in a gameplay session, I want to feel my sword combo against somebody, and I want to feel like it matters. Too often in Warframe, it's all about just having enough damage to just blitz through everything. So your sword is cutting through these people like butter. Ends up kind of feeling like a Dynasty Warriors game, which is not up my alley. Yeah, I want to actually have moments where you square up with a tough enemy. Maybe they put you in your place. Maybe you put them in theirs. I do know that Warframe has some bosses here and there. You even got the Kuvelich guys. They'll show up, they're pretty tanky, and they'll put you in your place for sure. But the way that the game handles that scenario is a bit cutscene-y or QTE centric. Like, I don't know what you want to call it, but you know, they just kind of grab you up and throw you, regardless of what you was doing. They didn't care. I gotta wrap this up, but I just felt like ranting and getting something off my chest a bit, which is just the fact that I'm starving for something tangible. I want to load into an open world game, and I want to see multiple systems that I have to consider: armor, weapon repair. I want to get money. I want to be able to have random encounters. When I walk from point A to point B, I just want to feel like there's a constant gameplay purpose for what I'm doing, especially alongside that great action melee combat. That just keeps me going. I feel like the only game that I can conceive of that's going to be up my alley is Dragon's Dogma 2, which, you know, it's pretty obvious since I love the first one. But yeah, I would say Dragon's Dogma. The fact that in the first game you would have a destination that they wanted you to go to so you could complete your objective. You had a day and night system. So when you set out on your journey, you had to consider the gear you had equipped, how much inventory space you had, because if you find some great gear or great materials out in the wild, you don't want to be over encumbered, because then your stamina is low. Or I can't recall if it was your stamina was low or you had to run slow. You had some type of penalty, but that meant you had to consider what you were doing. You had to consider how much lantern oil you still have, because what if nighttime comes up? You got to use your lantern. Are you going to be able to see, or is it going to be pitch black? There was so much little minute things, especially for my brain back then when I was younger, that I felt like I was always considering my actions. And even during combat, when I swung my sword, I felt like I need to pay attention or else I'm gonna die. And that game had a very interesting save system. So if you died in the field, it would likely send you back a few hours. So every moment definitely mattered. But the combat system on top of all that stuff, perfect. I can come up with ways to improve it, but especially for the time being, hell, I'll put it like this. There are not really any RPGs that have done what Dragon's Dogma did. And it did this so long ago. The only thing close to it is Dark Souls. But in my opinion, Dark Souls, especially in the beginning, started out in tight, narrow corridors, and it worked its magic from there. And it was great magic for sure. But taking it into an open world setting, and then also being able to do it without putting certain constraints on the player, like making the game sort of need to have lock on, because if you try and play Souls without lock on, it's not that great. It's not a fun time. You put that lock on and you start doing some work. Now some players out there, and I even can admit, when you turn lock on off in Souls games, that's how you unlock the true gameplay, because a lot of enemies do not know how to handle you once you start doing whatever you want to do. But I still would just prefer a system that didn't even need it in the first place. I can't recall if Devil May Cry games have lock on, but I never felt like it was a necessity. And I feel like action melee games should go more so in the Dragon's Dogma direction, less so in the Souls direction. But like I said earlier, I'm starving. When I scroll through gaming platforms, stores, and I look for different games, and I cannot find any that are for me, that I haven't played at least. None. I can find tons of first-person shooters, and I played a lot of those too. But I still see more that I could play and indulge myself in. I see a ton of trading card games. I see a ton of strategy games. But I don't see action melee. And my honest opinion is because that genre is genuinely hard to create. You gotta have the right movement, the right weapon feel, combos. Do you incorporate jumping or not? Some games choose to just not let you jump, which is in my opinion a cop-out. But still, there are so many variables to make an action-based melee game that I think a lot of developers just shy away from it because it's just not really worth the risk. And then when we finally get games that really try to take on the risk, Gotham Knights, Marvel's Avengers, we see what happens to them perception-wise. And in all honesty, I don't get the perception because where was the predecessor that gave you such a high bar of expectation in the first place? In my opinion, the bar was always low. And if the bar was low, once you get to something like Marvel's Avengers, it's actually technically looking quite good. For somebody starving like me, all I wanted Marvel's Avengers to do was keep that amazing combat system and then give me ample reasons to use it. They shot themselves in the foot by having missions structured in a way where certain missions, once you did them, they sort of became obsolete because you're so strong. Well, you're getting stronger, and the gear that they offer is beneath you. They shot themselves in the foot doing that. In my opinion, Marvel's Avengers mission structure should have always incorporated the fact that you can get gear anywhere. It just would depend on which difficulty did you select when you went into said mission, and it would give you appropriate rewards. That's all I needed to do, and then just keep coming up with new missions. That's all you had to do. More missions, higher difficulties, scaling numbers. That's it. But they tried to make it, I don't know what their goal was, but the way that they ended up doing it was very short-sighted. Even in Gotham Knights, I don't think it's a good idea to have a level cap. I would have vastly preferred a way for us to always feel like we're getting stronger and stronger, and let the enemies get as strong as they want to do. You can have them scale up to my level too. I just know that when I step into Gotham, I want to feel like each and every night is a dangerous night. So I better bring my A game if I want to clean up the streets. It kind of gave me that. I could lean into it a lot harder though. I'm starving. I need more action melee games, more than we have now. And I would really appreciate if developers would, especially the ones who have already tried. I don't think Square Enix, I don't think they're gonna give it another go with that Marvel's Avengers stuff. I don't think they're gonna do it. I wish they would. Keep up the good work. I need a Marvel's Avengers 2. People don't want to hear that, but I need it. I need a Gotham Knights 2. I need a Dragon's Dogmas 2. Otherwise, I gotta keep going back to the same old games, or games that are now defunct because their online services have been cut short. Ugh. Where is Dragon's Dogmas online when you need it? Whatever. I'm starving. I'm out.